incognito.
Yeah, we are recording. Hello, hello. We are going to go over today essentially the OER grant, as well as some information about OERs and where to go from here. So presentation is called I Was Approved for the Free Money. Now what do I need to do to get it? Brought to you by myself, John Adkins, and Rebecca Newman. So in terms of the grant was funded by the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, and it essentially provides $1,000 for faculty members who transition a course to OER, which of course is Open Educational Resources. And that course can either be both a existing course, or it can be a new course, right, as well. Yes, yeah, it can be both. The deadline for the course being offered in the new OER format is fall of 2021. So there's plenty of time to put the work in to get this transitioned or created. So what do we mean by OER? The West Virginia House Bill 2853 defines OER as teaching, learning, and resource materials of any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in public domain or have been released under an open license that permits low-cost access, use, adaptation, redistribution by others with no or limited restrictions. And basically it comes down to what you are legally able to do with the material and how you can share it, share what you create. It comes down to licensing. So there are 5 R's to open educational resources. The first one is retain. So do you have the right to make, own, create, control copies of the content? Do you have the right to revise? So the right to use the content in a wide variety of ways. So in a classroom, study group, website, video, etc. The right to remix. So can you adapt it, adjust it, modify, or alter the content itself? Do you have the right to reuse, which is the right to combine the original or revised material or content with other open content to create something new? So create a mashup of sorts. And do you have the right to redistribute? So do you have the right to share the copies of the original content, your revisions, or your remixes with others? So can you give it to a friend? Can you use it in a classroom? That type of thing.
Joe, go ahead. Joe has a question.
Okay, thank you. Do you have to have all 5 of those? Can you exclude one? For example, can is it OER if you don't have the right to remix?
Well, here's this is kind of where it gets tricky. For the purposes of this particular grant, you have to use OER, and those OER resources require all 5 R's.
Thank you.
So, next slide. So, John is going to talk to you about public domain and licensing. So I'm going to hand it over to him.
All right, so this is a little bit about what actually qualifies you to be able to use it. First is what's in the public domain. That refers to creative materials that are not protected by intellectual property rights. Copyright, trademark, patents. Anyone can use a public domain work without obtaining permission, but you can never own it. So we can all go out and publish our copy of the Bible if we want, because it is out of copyright. It's in the public domain. What we cannot do is put copyright John Adkins on it and then sue someone else who's publishing one. Now, how does something enter the public domain? The most common way is the copyright's expired. Anything prior to 1925 published in the United States is in the public domain. So that's one way to enter the public domain. Also, a lot of materials, originally the copyright time, length was much shorter than it is now. Started out at one point at 14 years. It could be renewed for another 14, and a lot of people didn't. So there's a lot of material that is post 1925 that was not renewed. The owner can place an item in the public domain. Matter of fact, Tom Lehrer, the humorous musician, has just placed all of his songs in the public domain. You can make that decision for yourself if you're the copyright owner. And the other way, the other way is that the type or nature of the work is not protected by copyright. In some instances, for instance, phone books, listings of data, those things are not copyrightable because there's not a creative component to it. And so, data itself is not copyrightable. Now, and other items are anything published by the U.S. government. So, that's why, the Mueller report, what we've seen of it can be copyrighted or can be published by anyone because it's a government publication. Okay, can you go to the next one?
Rebecca now, thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. All right, so one of the other way that these things can become available to you is Creative Commons licensing. Creative Commons is an organization, but more importantly, it's a set of copyright licenses that allow a creator to set usage rights that are less than those that they would hold under full copyright. This is something the copyright holder chooses, and they choose which license among the Creative Commons license they want and what restrictions they can put on that. And this is a wonderful place for you to find materials. Most of our OER materials are going to have some sort of Creative Commons licensing. Now, one thing I want to point out to you is what you're producing in your classes through this grant will need to also have a Creative Commons license so that other people can use it. So, one of the things that the purpose of the grant is to help build a warehouse of ready to drop in classes that anyone in the state or anyone in the world can use in their curriculum. Okay, and next slide. Thank you. So there are 6 common Creative Commons licenses. Attribution CC BY. What that is Creative Commons by. That means anybody can use it for whatever purpose, commercial or otherwise. They can remix it, redistribute it, build on it, whatever, as long as they give you credit for it. That's kind of the, in some ways, that's kind of the academic's favorite one, and that's the least restrictive one. Attribution share alike, BYSA. That means you can do whatever you want with it, but you've got to share your material the same way I have. So what they say is use my stuff, but when you do, you've got to make it available for other people to use as well. Creative Commons by ND, which is attribution no derivatives. This means you can use it, you can even publish it, but don't make any changes to it, and you have to give me credit. This one isn't as useful to you in your classes unless you're not wanting to change it. So if there's an article that you find or a lab experiment or whatever, you can make use of it in your class. You just cannot make any changes to it. So if you weren't perfectly happy with it, doesn't fit perfectly well into your class, you may not be able to use that. Okay, next slide. Attribution, non-commercial. This one's fine for us because we're not doing things commercially. We're, we are not for profit. So this allows you to adapt, rework it, whatever, but don't put it in your new textbook that you're selling through McGraw-Hill. BYNCSA, non-commercial share alike. What you can see here, and I won't go through the last two because you can read as well as I can, and we'll make the slides available to you as well. But what you can see here is this gives you a menu when you're a content creator. This gives you a menu of ways that you can make items available, and you can set the licenses. Now, a lot of times, even copyrighted materials, you call the folks, and then they say, "Oh yeah, you can do that." Well, this is, you don't have to call me. I'm telling you up front, here's what I allow you to do. So that's kind of what your Creative Commons licenses are. They go ahead and they've got this menu of different ways that they can make things available for other people to use. And they tell you up front, here's what I'll allow. And there's a surprising amount of material that's available this way. One other example is open access journals. So if an article in a journal was published under an open access license, most of the time you'll be able to incorporate that into your class. Okay, so let's see where I am on this. Okay, next. What about stuff in the library? Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And before I continue on, does anybody have questions about Creative Commons licenses?
Where do you identify these? I see these little icons that you have. Yeah, I think people are asking the same question. Where do you identify these different graduations of licensing or Creative Commons?
It'll be in the same sort of place you would find the copyright notice. You can also do on the material. You can also, in some cases, do some searching. In Google, for instance, you can limit by particular licenses, I believe.
Thank you.
And if you need more help identifying those things afterward, we can show you some of the limiters that Google and some of the other systems have to help you with that. And generally copyright is at the very bottom of the page. And so that's often where you'll find your Creative Commons license. All right, so what about stuff from the library? Can we use stuff from the library? We would love for you to use stuff from the library, but for this particular project, you can't. It has to be an OER, and it has to fall into those 5 Rs. Stuff available through the library does not fall into that category. So what I would suggest you do, if you have a couple of classes in mind, is check to see what we have in the library and use library resources for one of your classes and then an OER for another. Go ahead, Joe.
So if we do this in a class and the student produces work product using resources that they found in the library, does this mean that it's not permissible?
No, that simply means that the textbook that you use for the class or the resources that you provide to them have to be OER, but the student can use copyrighted work, whatever it is. Of course, you're going to talk about citation, etc. But the student is free to use what they want to construct their work. You just can't, for teaching purposes, use anything that doesn't fall into this category. John, did you want to add anything else?
No, that's what I was going to say.
Go ahead, Ida.
I have a question. So recently, John was helping me look for some resources, and he came across a pretty cool one. When I scrolled down, I think it was from MIT or some other really major university, and they have a whole website dedicated to this open resource class that's very similar to mine. When I scrolled down to look at their list of recommended books, they had listed the old version or old edition of the actual book that I am currently using. So are old editions of books allowed as open resources, or is this school made a mistake?
That would be by publisher, I would say.
Yeah, it would depend on if the copyright holder had released the old edition
Right.
as an open resource.
Okay.
Now, the reason that we're stuck particularly in this situation is that we're not just doing an open educational resource, we're doing it to meet the qualifications of the grant.
Mm-hmm.
So we're restricted in that, we've all had, some interesting things to say about OER. We all support OER, but it sometimes becomes kind of a Kool-Aid drinking thing where, but that's not OER. I can't do this with it. I cannot use it in my class. And we don't really believe that, except in relation to this grant. So if you have more than one class, do the one fully OER so you get your $1,000. And everything else,
We can mismatch.
we'll do free to students with you, and we'll be able to make use of whatever resources we want.
Yeah, I only have one class, so it's okay. I'll figure it out. I was just curious because it will be so easy to just tell everybody, just get the previous edition of the book and done.
There are instances where publishers have taken a previous edition of a textbook, and in some cases taken their name off of it and released that old edition as a open educational resource.
Okay, I'll keep looking. Thank you.
Yeah, in this case, the restrictions that they put make sense because you're getting paid $1,000 not just to provide your students with free stuff, but to provide other students with free stuff. So they're paying you $1,000. They're taking your stuff and then making it available to other educators. So in this case, you have to be really careful that anything you put in the class can be used by anyone, anywhere, can be published on the open internet without an issue. So you're building this for other people too.
Ray, did you have a question?
Someone has their hand raised. I just wanted to call your attention to you.
Alize?
Yeah, I just had one question. So if one of the class is OER, does that mean that class need to stay OER for the rest of the year? Or at some point it can go back to not being an OER class?
Well, it at least I know has to be labeled in the catalog as an OER course. So.
Okay. So it needs to be an OER course until that class is not
I can't imagine the administration would want you to go back because it is a selling point to us to have books on the record that have free textbooks so that it's cheaper for students. So once it is on the books as an OER, I can't imagine that the administration would want you to go back because they want to sell it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the bottom line would be that if you list it in the catalog, that catalog's going to be pertinent for the academic year. And if you wanted to modify it for the subsequent publication of the catalog, that would be up to you and your supervisor. But at least for a year, it'd have to be OER, in my view.
Yeah, okay, perfect, thank you.
All right, anything else?
Hi, John. I have a question. This is Nawaz. So actually, I missed the first part of this presentation. And first of all, thank you for doing this session. and I had a class, so I just came now. So the thing is, okay, I have one course for the OER grant. This is the Java programming, and basically when I teach the programming in the class, I actually create my own materials. So I give the students the slides and also like some tutorials that's made by me. So for this grant, what do I need to supply to this authority? Is it like my slide, my tutorial materials, and the syllabus? That's it, or what do I need to report to them?
Well, basically, that's pretty much it. You'll just need to release those materials under a non-restrictive Creative Commons license so that other people can take your course and use it as a course in a box and teach that course from your materials.
Okay, so the materials means if I just give the slides, that's it, or I need to write like a book.
Yeah, we'll go a little bit further in it, but if basically all the materials that are all the learning resources in the class are things that you would need to be able to hand off to other folks.
Yeah, I understand that, but I am just not clear about what the material. I mean, okay, so for the student, I give the lecture slides, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I also give them some tutorials, like which need longer discussion and those kind of stuff that is written by me. I mean, so for the OER grant, I mean, if just the slide and the tutorial material is that enough, or do I need to give them extra things so that other educators need?
So I would say that pretend that you are building this course for an adjunct. What would an adjunct need in order to move forward? That is what you need to give them. So if an adjunct would need the slides and quizzes, then give them the slides and quizzes. So pretend that you are building this class, but then allowing an adjunct to teach it. That's what they're going to need.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Oh, also, you mentioned that you came in a little bit late, but we are recording this and we'll make it available.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Okay.
So, sorry to interrupt, but our exams then are going to have to be shared as well?
My understanding, yes, because that will be a learning resource.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt there too, but does that mean like the student then will have access prior to taking the exam on them? Like if
No.
it's on the internet?
Not shared to the students, and it won't be available in places where they have full courses with teacher resources. Those you have to be registered as a teacher to download that part of it.
Okay, but that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe?
Yes. So being very explicit here, I embed in my course resources that have been created by Rebecca. Are those OER resources if they've been created and distributed through eLearn?
You would have to ask my permission. So yes, you can use those as OER. So you would have to ask permission from whoever created that thing. So if you have some things that are created by me, John, Indra gave you a couple of things, you just have to ask their permission.
Okay, then do I only have to ask their permission, or does the person that's using my course have to ask permission also? So when you grant permission for me to use your stuff, can I then say, can I grant permission on your behalf to other people?
Essentially, Rebecca would have to put one of the CC licenses on her material.
Okay. Then my next question is, I embed several things from YouTube in my class. Are those, I mean, they're available for people to use, but can I embed them in my class as OER?
It's
That's it.
that's one of those, and we'll probably have to have more conversations with those folks. That's one of those areas where it is borderline.
Yeah.
You're linking to something that's freely available on the web, but that person hasn't necessarily released it. I think the real drawing line is going to be between linking and embedding. Embedding, probably not. Linking, probably okay.
Okay, can you explain the difference to me? I'm sorry to be so ignorant.
Well, it's a matter of interpretation. When you embed something, you're pulling it out and putting it into and making it a part of a different thing. Whereas the link relies on the continued allowance of it to be available externally.
So the difference between embedding and linking, for those who are not familiar with this, embedding would be I put a PDF in the classroom. Linking is I put a link to EBSCO so that embedding would be I put the video in MP4 format in the classroom versus I put a link to YouTube in my classroom. When you put a link to YouTube in your classroom, if that creator decides to take it down, the link is broken. So you're following what you should be doing. If you put an MP4, that kind of preserves it so that if the creator wants to take it down, it won't come down in your classroom, and it should. Is that what you're asking?
That clears it right up for me. Thank you. I'm lowering my hand.
And just so anybody knows, anybody who has my stuff in their classroom, consider my stuff as open Creative Commons as possible. Share it, manipulate it, let other people use it. There you go.
Certain that we add those licenses, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will. But, if you're building class, paste it on there. It's fine. We have other... I can't tell who's raising their hand.
Dr. Ali. Indra, did you have a question?
No, I think
Yeah.
Ida has a question. I don't have.
Yes. So we were speaking about slides earlier, and I usually share with my students a pretty skeleton-like slide. So when we're sharing with this individual, and then I lecture, right? And then we fill it up together. So are we supposed to give away everything we know, or just what we give the students?
If it were me, I would suggest building lecture notes or, putting the notes piece in the slide. I mean, you might still not be giving that to your students, but you really are basically handing this class off to an unknown professor somewhere else to teach it.
Yeah, but they should be able to fill in those blanks, right? No?
That's not
With their own knowledge?
Yeah, the idea of the grant is to build some course in a boxes so that people can teach the class other places pretty much from the get-go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe?
Yeah, so I inherited the class that I'm teaching from a now retired professor. And the now retired professor created materials. Can I continue to use those materials? I give credit to the now retired professor, but I don't know that those materials are Creative Commons.
Unless they've explicitly made them Creative Commons, I would probably just send them an email and ask them if they're willing to, license them under Creative Commons. But it's kind of it's a tricky thing. We're used to kind of unofficially taking, but it's something to think about now. If you want to make things available for other people to use, we as content creators need to be cognizant that unless we explicitly give permission, we have full control and copyright.
Thank you.
Indra, did you have something?
Yes. So I was wondering, do we have to create assessment rubrics for this course that we are creating? Would that include to creating brand new rubrics of our own? I assume that we couldn't like use LLO rubrics or whatever the rubrics we have, or do we leave the creation of those rubrics to the people who will be teaching those courses?
I think that you're probably looking at trying to create the rubric as, to provide the that professor with a course in a box.
Okay. Well, another thing is just a thought. So I was thinking my course, for example, is a section of Psych 101, and there are other people who are teaching Psych 101, and this course will also be taught online and in seat, and my course is online. So let's say what happens in the future if the version of the Psych 101 I create with OER, and let's say students flock to that course because to that course section, because we have free materials as opposed to paying for course materials in other sections or the in-seat version of that course. So what would happen then? And I'm scared right now.
Don't be scared. That's actually a positive.
Okay.
That's what we would like to see, is that the pressure of the free to students and the OER classes would cause, students to go to choose those classes, and would cause other instructors to either adopt your material because it's an OER class and they don't have to ask you permission to use that material, or, to build their own OER or free to students class as well.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
If you want, let's Rebecca, if you want to go forward.
And then we'll answer the questions that we have at the end.
All right, so I think, yeah, I'm unmuted. I think that we have figured out what you have agreed to do. So you have agreed to create this boxed course with material that other people can use, manipulate, etc., etc. You've agreed to start this no later than the fall of 2021. So we have a little bit of time, right? And then you have to administer a survey provided by HEPC to your students about the resources. And then you're going to have to submit documentation. So we talked about that earlier. What do you need to submit? You need to submit the syllabus and electronic copies of the course materials utilized. So quizzes, PowerPoints, whatever it is. And then proof of the entry in the catalog. So you can do something like the catalog is published online, so you can just send them a link to the catalog, or you can send them a PDF of that particular page illustrating that it is listed as an OER in our catalog. All right. Where can I find OER material? OER material is everywhere. We will send everybody who attended today this PowerPoint. And so these are some links that you can follow to find OER material. You'll notice some unusual ones here, like Google Books. Google Books actually has a limiter that allows you to limit to free books or ebooks that are no longer under copyright. So if you have any questions about how to use these, or if you find something and you're not sure if this follows the guidelines, shoot one of the librarians an email. You guys know you can email us individually, or you can email library or librarian@ucwb.edu if you find anything on any of these websites, and we can talk about what you found. What if I need is not available? Then it is your time to shine. So you are going to, surely there is something that is available that is no longer in copyright or that is OER, and you're going to have to kind of put it together. So it might be that you're going to take this chapter from a book that you found on EBSCO, or I'm sorry, not on EBSCO, on Google Books, and you're going to take this journal article that you found that's no longer under copyright, and you're going to take, you know, a bit here and a bit there, and you're going to supplement and build the course that way. And then somebody at some other school who teaches some obscure course, you know, advanced Russian literature, is going to be super happy with you. So know that all of your hard work will make another professor happy, make their lives easier. That's great, right? John or Anna, do you want to add anything else?
Actually, one of the things I want to say is that how do I go about making something Creative Commons? Well, really, it's just kind of about declaring it. So if you've written something, or say there's a web evaluation piece, you know, module that Rebecca's done, on the Creative Commons website, they have instructions on how to either put a button on it that says what it's licensed under. You know, they have text that you can put in. They also have text or how to mark a document declaring that Creative Commons license for offline work as well. So you really just have to go to that Creative Commons website and see what needs to happen, and then you can get the icon or whatever so you can put on it and make that declaration. And like I say, you know, librarians are stupid, sick, crazy about making all the stuff they do Creative Commons. So, you know, we're very happy if somebody reuses our material. So now, you know, Anna, do you have anything else, or do you just want to take more questions?
Well, Kevin, I just wanted to say I hope that list of other resources helped to answer your question, so that you have other methods of finding OER resources. Yes. Okay, great. Excellent. I thought it would.
So, John, in the list I found that MIT Open Education Resource. So that is, I mean, in my course, sometimes I use their material. So is it valid resource for the OER grant?
Well, double check to make certain that you know, I believe most of the MIT OER site is, I believe, 100% open for reuse. But double check the license, because like we saw, there were 6 different licenses under Creative Commons.
Okay.
You know, but in general, you know, you can take everything from their lectures to their syllabi to everything else and remix it how you wish.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anyone else have any questions? I understand if you're still going, oh wow, that's a lot, but we will give you the slides. We'll make the video available, and we are available to answer any of your questions as you get further into it. You're not in it alone.
John, I have a question. I have other classes that are now fully OER that I've done before. Are we going to start being required to list those as well as OERs in the catalog? Or the ones that come from this grant?
Technically, only the one that comes from this grant is supposed to be, but that would, again, probably be up to administration in the end.
It could only make them more popular among students if they were listed as OER.
Yeah.
And they can be listed as OER courses, even if you're not maybe making them available. The making them available as an OER resource is a function of the grant.
Okay.
But it's also a function of the idea of OER.
And we might also do a free to students course, so it'll be differentiated in the catalog. There'll be OER courses and free to students, so that if you're using EBSCO stuff, students still know that your course has free textbooks, so that they take your course, or are more likely to take your course over someone else's, which helps you.
Yeah.
Personally, my preference is to focus more on the free to students things outside of this grant, because we make a lot of really good resources available to you, and we should make use of them if we can. How many OER grants? There were 16 grants that were given to the University of Charleston. We had the most grants out of all universities, including WVU or Marshall. But the deadline has passed for that. But if there's a class that you're working on that you would like us to assist you in making it at least free to students, we can certainly do that.
And that's not to say that, you know, higher education, West Virginia may not make the grant available in the future as well.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's questions.
Anyone else? Dr. Ali, your hand's still up. Do you have another question?
Sorry. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for attending. We are here as a resource for you, until you finish it, and after that as well. Everybody take care.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.